Hello everybody and welcome back to the Beads of Paradise NYC YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss a method of jewelry closure called crimping. What is that, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. Crimping is a method of closure that we generally use on a type of cord that is metal based. So a nylon coated stainless steel cord such as this that comes on a little roll such as this. And we do sell that on the online store by the yard, or you can get little spools here as well. And on that cord, because it is that metal base, we never tie a knot with it, which is something you can do with textile cords like silk or some nylons. So instead of tying things to the cord, we use these little teeny tiny little metal beads that are so small, they're kind of hard to show off. And those will wind up going on the cord around your clasp, and eventually they will get squashed or crimped, as it is officially called, and when done correctly, it will hold your entire piece together. It sounds deceptive that it's that easy, but it's true, and that is in fact how all of the necklaces that I'm wearing around my neck were made. And I'm going to show you the same method I used to teach it in the class that I've taught in store for several years, in the same way that I have done it for 14 years, which is about how long I've been making jewelry professionally. So in order to crimp, of course, the first thing you're going to need is the piece of jewelry that you have strung on your cord. For today, I'm going to be doing two examples, one on a necklace that I've quickly whipped up on the Softflex wire, and quickly a little itty-bitty bracelet. But one of the things that's really wonderful about Softflex wire is that you can really make anything with it. You can make mask chains, you can make bracelets, you can make earrings, you can make multi-stranded necklaces, wrapped bracelets, waist beads. Really, your imagination is the limit, and the crimping method is pretty much the same, occasionally with little deviations for everything. So of course you're going to have your piece of jewelry, you're going to have it strung on whichever diameter of cord works best for you, and ideally you're going to have a little bit left over. You're also going to, of course, need your crimp beads. So I usually use 2 to 3 on each side. And the ones that we're using today, I have to show you, are base metal. We do sell them in sterling silver and gold fill. They function the same, though they are a slightly different shape. And your clasp if you are using one. And so when you're designing, and it's slightly less important because one of the great things about Softflex wire is that you can adjust things up to the very last minute, but it's always important to have the size of your clasp in mind as you are designing, especially with a bracelet, because, you know, that can really affect where it sits on your wrist. And some people are more persnickety about their necklaces as well in terms of where they sit. So as you're designing, it never hurts to have in mind what you're making, how long it's going to be, you know, where it's going on your body, and keep the fit in mind. But like I said, one of the wonderful things about crimping and using the Softflex wire is you can change your design, you can change your mind up until we crimp our final piece. We do our final crimp, and then if you decide you don't like anything, you're going to have to cut it apart and start again. So let's see, to start, let's move a few of these things out of the way, and I'm going to focus this down so you can see a little bit more of what I am doing. So I'm going to put, again, 3 crimp beads on each side, and that will take you just a minute to do. And this is a lot of leftover cord. I gave myself a little bit more than necessary, and that is because I'm going to show you today how to conserve your cord. Because sometimes you like to give yourself, you know, a lot of extra room when you're stringing. And I'm going to show you how you can do that and still keep as much of your cord left over as possible. So I pulled a whole yard here. So to start the crimping, I'm going to take one side of my clasp, and I'm going to also scoot my crimp beads down to about 1 inch or 2 away from the cord. So I'm going to leave that space, and once you get really good at it, you can even let less. If you're kind of not sure if you're going to like the length or the design, you might want to leave a lot more there. It's up to you. And the way you put this on is that you string your clasp on just as though it were a bead, and then you feed it back through your crimp beads. It doesn't seem like your cord should be able to go through your crimp beads twice, but I assure you it will. Sometimes you just kind of have to wiggle it around a little bit. And so when it's first on, it will look sort of like this. And we're going to pull it down, scoot it down, so that the cord sits right around your clasp. It forms a little loop. Generally, we want it to be pretty darn tight. And that's how you get that done. And you might have a little bit left over on here. Now, like we mentioned, this is a yard of cord, so there's a whole lot left here. And I'm going to scoot the rest of mine down here. And this is my pro tip when it comes to crimping, is that I like to put my clasp, the other end of my clasp, which you usually have, whether you're using a lobster claw, which is what we're using today, or a toggle, or a screw clasp, or magnetic clasp, there'll be two sides. And especially when you're making a piece of jewelry, remember it's going on a 3D form. It's going around your body. So you always want to close your jewelry keeping that in mind. So I attach my second jump ring to my clasp so the clasp looks like it does when it is finished. And then I am going to once again, even though it's a lot more cord here, you can deal with it, string it through that second jump ring again, just like it were a bead. And you can see it's starting to look a little bit more like a piece of jewelry now. And then I'm going to go once again, go through those 3 crimp beads. And I'm going to pull it tight. And I can pull on both sides to make sure it's tight. And sometimes, you know, you kind of have to wiggle beads down to move it around. You can use your pliers to give it a little bit of yank to yank the cord. Because ideally, you don't really want to see any excess cord when it is closed like so. So when it's about finished, when it's about ready to be a finished piece of jewelry, it will look sort of like this. I'm going to bring it up for just 1 second, because at this point you have a great opportunity, again, to put it around your body, to try it on, decide whether you like the length or not. I'm wearing a lot, so it's kind of hard to tell, but what's one more? I think the length is fine. If there was anything at this point that you decided you didn't like, the length, the design, the style, you could pluck all of these crimp beads off, take it apart, and put it back together again. And in order to crimp it, before we crimp it, I also like to make sure, especially with a necklace, that I could sort of fold it together in one piece. Make sure that it is not too stiff. So you don't want it to sit really stiff on the cord like this. It's going to make it much more susceptible to breaking. And I like to make sure that when I hold it open like this, I don't have a whole gob of cord hanging out. And different beads will create different effects there. One reason I like closing it like this in this 3D form is because it makes it a little bit more likely you will not string it too tight or too loose. So in order to do the final crimping step, I'm going to take my flat nose pliers, place them directly over my 3 crimp beads, and squash them. So I'm going to take out my anger, my aggression, my angst, and it's 2021. So, you know, we all have something we could be a little annoyed about, or just to give yourself a little muscle stretch. And so I do that, the same thing on the other side. And you never ever want to trim your cord before you crimp it. And before we do this next step was to make sure that you have crimped it tight enough. So in order to do that, I give it a little bit of a yank. And if nothing moves, then it's crimped well. If the beads move, the beads slide, anything happens, you want to tighten that back up and then crimp it again. Crimp it a little bit harder. Take all your energy and squash those little beads out. So now it looks like a necklace. You just have all this cord hanging out. So then I'm going to take my cutters and I'm going to slip them as close as I can to the end of the cord and get as close as I can and give it a little snip. You don't want to have cord hanging out because that can rub you on the neck. And I don't personally think it does any good to have it going back through the bead. Some people like to filter it back through there. but I don't think it serves a great purpose. But as with a lot of jewelry making things, if you like it, you know, go ahead and do it. Alright, so I'm going to do one more little crimping example on our bracelet. And something to keep in mind, and a great way to demonstrate how the length matters is for a bracelet. And that when you're stringing it, you do not want the two ends to touch. I know a lot of people, when they're stringing, and with a stretchy bracelet, you can have the ends touch. It's going to be a seamless piece. But with a clasp, you want to always make sure you're leaving room for the clasp. So as you can see for mine, I left about, 3/4 of an inch, because that's about how much space your clasp is going to take up. So we're going to focus this back down here. Remember, I moved my crimp beads down to the end, and I'm going to string my clasp on just as though it were a bead in front of my crimp beads. And then I'm going to go back through the crimp beads like so and pull it tight. And then again, my pro tip, even with a bracelet, is to put your other end of your clasp into your clasp. So make it so that it looks like a finished piece right there. So that way you're sort of building ease, you're building the space for your body into your piece of jewelry as you put it together. So you makes it less likely you're going to close it up too tight or even too loose. And so remember, I string it through the cord. I go back through the crimp beads with my cord, and everything starts to look finished. And if anything is loose like that, I'm just going to go back in and tighten it up. Then again with my flat nose pliers, and again this is where you could try it on, make sure you like the length, like everything about it. And to crimp it, you just go over those crimp beads and only those crimp beads, and you squash them very hard. This one requires a little bit of muscle, apparently, these crimp beads. And you do the same thing to both sides. Give it a good squeeze. You make sure nothing budges. And then you cut your cord with your cutters as close as you can to the edge of your crimp beads. If you got to wiggle your cutters in there, you're going to want to do that. You give it a little snip on one side, you give it a little snip on the other, and voila, that is how you crimp. Thank you guys so much for being with me today. I hope you learned something. If you want to purchase any of the things we talked about today and more, you can head over to our website. I'm going to leave links to all of the things that we used today into our website in the description. And also, as a note, you can get a 10% discount off anything in the store using the code word, the discount code, Don't Crimp My Style, on our website. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe. I'm going to keep trying to do these, and let me know if there's anything you'd like to see more of. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.